Alright guys, Wyatt here, and welcome back to week 5 of our 12-part Java Lab series. This week, what we're going to be working on, the objectives we're going to accomplish are we're going to create objects, read input from the user, create and call methods, create an array for the first time, and practice using loops. But how are we going to do that? Well, let's see. Part A. You are planning a once-in-a-lifetime vacation to France next week and want to see how you'll physically fit in. Understanding the French invented the body mass index, or BMI, you want to know some numbers before you step abroad. Alright. So create a person object that is comprised of weight, which is going to be stored as a double, height, which is a double, and sex, which is going to be used as a char. So, male or female. In the main method, what we're going to do is use a scanner to prompt the user to enter the height, weight, and sex variables for the person object. Then, we're going to create a person object with this criteria. We'll display it accordingly. All we're doing is the BMI today, so we don't need to worry about these other things. But we will use, I don't really care how it looks actually. So, then what we need to do is create a body mass index function that is called on a person object and returns a double representing their BMI. Alright, that kind of makes sense so far. Here's a formula for BMI. And part B. Here, in the main method, we'll create an array that stores 5 person objects. Here's the syntax for creating an array. For those of you who are new to arrays, what an array is, it is a data type, and it stores objects in there. So, in the past, we had one object. We had, we said we have one person object, and this is what we got, and here he is. Now, we want to have multiple person objects, and where are they going to go? They could just live there and be as they are, but if we want to store them all together and access them somewhere else and move them as a unit, well, we can do that with an array. So an array is essentially, it's almost like a locker setup. So you got array position 1, array position 2, array position 3, and they all have to store the same type. So here, person object. Alright, so we got 5 person objects, and what we're going to do is create a loop that prompts the user to create 5 person objects and store each person objects in the array after they're created. What we're going to then do is calculate the BMI of each person in the array and find the, we're going to get the average of everyone. Alright, we got a general idea of what we're trying to do. Let's make it happen. Alright, so what we got to do first, open everything up. I already got a folder on my desktop called Lab 5. Here we hit Command-Shift-P, create Java project with no tools. We're going to do it by ourselves. And we're going to name this project Going to France. Big deal. Alright, and we can see the Lab 5 project right here. And right away, after creating it, look, we got our new project that was just created right now, 8:32 p.m. And that's good. Okay, so what we want to do now is we're going to create a person object. So if we know we're going to be creating a person object, we need to name this file person, and I just closed it, and our class has to be of person as well. Alright, we're not moving it to trash. So in order to declare the type that you want to create, you have to have the file named that, and the class has to be that same label as well, and we're off to a good start. So we know that instance variables we need are going to be the weight, height, and sex. So the instance variables are what a person has. So, you know, they have a height, they have a weight, and they're male or female, presumably. You know, and what we're going to say here is, okay, so what data type? Double for weight, or double for height, and then double for, or sorry, their sex is going to be labeled as a char variable, so as it is now. And the way that I like to create objects is using constructors. So what we're going to say is we're going to create a constructor that helps us create a person object. So we'll say public person, and it's going to take in 3 variables: the weight, height, and sex, and then we're going to set them to these variables above. So essentially we're going to pass in 3 numbers, or 3 somethings: double W, double H, and char S. And once we have that passed in, now we have the credentials to create a person object. We're going to set them to, we'll say this dot W, this dot weight equals W. Alright? We'll say this object's height will equal what is passed in as H, and this object's sex will equal what is passed in as S. Alright? So for example, if we want to create a new person object, we say, like we've created objects in the past, we'll say the object type, again ours is person, we'll give him a name, we'll go with Peter, and then we say new, and then the data type again, new person, and what type does this take in? So here, you know, we could pass in some data right now. We could say their weight is 165, that's a double. Their height in inches, we're saying 71 inches high, and their sex, we're going to say male. Alright, so now this line essentially creates a person object for us. That's good. Alright, however, we want a scanner to prompt the user to enter the height, weight, and pounds. So that way, you know, you can enter yourself. See what your BMI is before you go to France. Alright, so again, we've used scanners a couple times. The data type is scanner. We're going to name our scan equals new scanner. Oh, whoa. System.in. Alright, and we now just imported the scanner. Nice. First thing we want to do is we want to prompt the user to enter something, right? So we're going to say system.out.println enter the height. Alright. Good. And now we need a new variable to accept this height as it's passed in. So we're going to call ours, you know, I mean, it's not a great word, but just to show you that it can be any word at all, we're going to say tallness, you know, equals scan.next double. Alright, so the next double that's read in is going to be stored as tallness, and that is actually what we're going to save our height as. So our height is no longer height, it is now the tallness of this guy. Next, what we want to do is some shortcuts. If you have everything highlighted, you can do Command, Shift, and press down, and it'll repeat that. So we can just Do Command Shift down to repeat it. Enter the weight, and we'll just call this one W because that's easier and it's simple and that's nice. Alright, and then lastly, what we want to say is enter the sex. And then we'll prompt them male, female, or other. Alright. And then, so now what we need to do, we got to change this line as well. We're no longer reading in a double. We're expecting a char, right? A character to read in. So next, I don't think there is something that reads in the next string, or that reads in the next character. So we're gonna say is we're gonna set sex to a string, and then we're gonna convert that into a character sex by using char s equals sex.char at, and now we're gonna get the first index position of whatever sex is, and hopefully it's an M, F, or O, and that will be now our char. Alright, and we're going to pass that in as S. So now we have officially, we've created a person object. We haven't used it yet, but they're there. And if we run this now and print it, it's going to print the position of where this person object is stored. And we don't want that, so we're not going to, but trust me, this is what we want. This is good stuff. Alright? So, next. So eventually we'll have to display the information below, display the BMI, but we need to calculate that, right? So what we have to do is create a new body mass function. Alright? So public, so we can access it outside the class later if we want to. And we know that it's going to return a double, right? It returns a double. Public double, and then body mass index. And it's going to take no parameters. We're going to call this person object on this method to return some information. And what do we need to do? First, well, let's go ahead and we're going to make some comments here to see what our formula is. So we know that double BMI is going to be what? Well, our weight comes in pounds. So this dot weight is good because, like I said, when we call it, here's how it's going to work. We're going to say something along the lines of Peter dot body mass index. Alright, so we know that this method is going to be called on Peter, so this refers to Peter right now. Whatever object it's called on, that's who this is. So this dot weight, we need to figure out pounds to kilograms. So let's do that right now. LBS to KGS. Alright, so boom. We're going to copy this conversion because we know that this is what we need. Alright, so wait a second. Alright. Divided by, and now we need to go inches to height in meters. So inches to meters. Inches to meters squared? Alright, so inches to meters, and then we square the whole thing. Inches to meters. Alright, so here we go. This is the number we need for that. So this dot height times this, the conversion rate. Nice. Alright, and then what we have to do is we have to square it. So let's see here. I don't believe we can go like this. But what we can do is, we know to square something you multiply it times itself. So we'll do that, and we'll put all of this in parentheses. Alright, so what's going to, PEMDAS, you know how that works. Alright, so now we should have our BMI from this formula that we copied. And now what we need to do is we need to return our BMI, alright, because we need to return a double. We want to see what the BMI of this person is. And now, the moment we've been waiting for, let's figure out Peter's BMI. Right now, if we run this, it'll work. However, it's not being set to a variable. So, we're getting his, well, I don't even think this will work actually. But so we need to say double, we'll call it Peter's BMI equals Peter.BMI. Yeah, and then we're calling this method. And what we need to do now is let's print it out. System.out.printf is a function we can use, and we can say something along the lines of Peter's BMI is, and then we got to go %d, so we're going to pass in a decimal using the printf function, just something a little bit different. And now we can pass in Peter BMI. Alright, because that's this value right here. And let's run it. Let's see what happens. Terminal. Going to France. Enter the height. We said 71 before. Enter the weight, 165. Male. So it didn't like our printf. Line 35. Format. Alright, real quick, let's figure out printf Java. Double, that's what we're trying to get to. Use, okay, and then we have to say this guy. %.2f instead of %d. Let's now see if this guy works. Enter the height, 71, 165. Alright, his BMI is 23.01. What does that mean? I don't know. But we got a number. Does that seem like an average BMI? Let's see. What was the BMI in our example? Oh, I deleted it. Average BMI. Okay, so it's right between 18.5 and 24. So we did our calculations. We did some calculations. That's good. All right. So part B. Nice. Good job for getting here. Part B, what we're going to do, we're going to look at some new things. We're going to create an array that stores 5-person objects. So right now we got Peter as 1. But we're not going to count him in this array. This is an array for different people. So this is how we create an array. We say person with a hard brackets after it. The name of the array, so we'll call ours person array equals new person. Again, what type of is it? What is our data type? It says person array. We want it to have 5 people in it, and that's how we do that. And now what we have to do is create a loop, and our loop is going to be a for loop. And what this for loop says is for int I equals 0, so we're creating a value I to be 0, and as long as that is less than the person array length, we want to go through, and after each increment, after we iterate through this array, we are going to iterate I by 1. So the first thing that it's checked is I less than the length of the array? If it is, do this. After you do this, increment I. Alright? So it's kind of a lot to take in right now, but if you do it a couple times, it'll start to make sense. And what we're going to do now is say, what do we need to do? Well, we need to create 5-person objects. So what we're going to do here is kind of just copy most of this format that we used before. But the only difference is now, because these variables have already been created, the tallness, the W, the sex, the S, we're trying to just overwrite them, alright? So that's what we're doing right here. We're going to create new variables each time this is iterated through. And now that we have new variables each time, we're going to create a person called P1. And it's equal to new. Again, we say the data type person. And we're going to pass in the data we need. So we need their tallness, which is now recreated. Oh, wait. This is what we represent as the weight. So W, the height, is the tallness. And the char for sex is S. Alright? Nice. So now we have officially, this is going to iterate, the first time it goes through, it'll create a person object called P1. The next time it creates a person object called P1. The third time, but everyone's called P1 and they're just going to overwrite. But that's why we created this array right here. So now what we can say is person array at this position I. So the first time it goes through at the very start of the array, make that person 1. The next time this array iterates through, I will be 1. So now the person in position 1 is going to be whoever this new P1 is, because these variables are updated, right? Alright, so good. Now we calculated and added an array to everyone there. And now what we can do is we can calculate the average of everyone. So what we're going to need is a double that is set to 0. So we're going to get the total BMI of everyone, and then we're going to divide by the amount of people that we have. But to get the total, we have to have a number that starts off at 0 so we can add to it without it being weird later on. And I equals 0. So we want to iterate through the array again. So as long as I is less than the length of the entire array, we want to keep going. And what we need to do now is we're going to say the total equals the person array at this position. So now we're at this person, kind of like how above we said Peter.body mass. So now imagine this is Peter's friend, Pete1. Alright, so while we're on his position, let's get body mass. What was our body mass index? And we want to not only get that number, but we want to add it to whatever our total was. So we're going to get our total every time. So we'll keep a running tally of where that is. We're going to add our person array, that value to it from their BMI, which will return something around the lines of 23 like we saw below. And then it's going to equal total. After we get the total of everyone in the array, the last step that we have to do is we'll say double average, now we need to calculate it, equals total divided by person array dot length, right? So that's how many people there are. Alright, nice. That's good. I think we have to say length plus, so length is going to be 4, right? We'll see what this looks like, alright? We'll put in some decent values and we'll see if this should be 4 or 5. And now we're going to print everything out and say something along the lines of the average BMI is Very average. Alright, let's run this bad boy and see what we get. Enter the height. So this is for Peter again. So again, now here we are, enter the height. So this is for person 1. 71. Enter the height. We'll say 78, 190. F. Enter the height. 200. Oh, wow, that is the height. That's okay, though. And, man, so we got a person that's freaking huge out here. And then a person that's a little bit smaller. Enter the height. Enter the weight. The average BMI is this. So, well, it worked. We're not sure maybe that's a good average or not, but it's the average we got. And today, we went through some examples of using loops. We practiced creating an array. We created and called some methods, read input from the user, and created objects. Alright guys, thanks for tuning in till week 5. Hope you guys learned some stuff. I look forward to seeing you next week. Like and subscribe.